Welcome to One Verse. Today we have Todd Hostetler, the pastor at City on a Hill Teaching Center, and also Jeff Millslegel, a Bible teacher at City on a Hill. They're going to be discussing a verse I give to them in random, and Jeff, I'm going to give this one to you. And it is an Old Testament verse. It is Joshua 4:18, and that says, "And it came to pass, when the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord had come from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched the dry land, that the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before." So that's Joshua 4:18.
Okay, so this is, the verse 18 is actually describing what happens right as they're leaving the Jordan River. So let me back up a little bit and give you what's going on. Of course, you remember when Israel crossed the Red Sea, Moses stood up there and raised his hands and whatever it is, and they parted and they went through on dry land. When they crossed on the Jordan, when they're crossing into it, the priests carrying the ark had to touch the water first. So they actually are carrying it, they go down there. So imagine all the faith that took, because this would have been the next generation. They've heard the stories of what happened at the Red Sea, but they wouldn't have seen it. And so they're walking down there and they touch their feet, touch the Jordan, and then the Jordan River stops up and they go through. So this is the very end of that. So when the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord had come from the midst of the Jordan. So afterwards, this has all happened. So now they were the first to go in and the last to leave. They're carrying the ark after all the people have gone through, and the soles of the priests' feet touched the dry land. As soon as their feet touched dry land, then all of a sudden the waters of the Jordan that were held back now all came and flowed again. So what's cool about that is what is something that's mentioned here earlier in this chapter, where they're supposed to pick 12 stones. So the priests are standing here, and they're standing on the in the water there, and the water's backed up. And so now the people go through, and they're supposed to pick these big 12 stones up from the middle of the Jordan. So they carry them across, and you get to a little bit later on here from verse 18. So I'm dropping down to verse 20. And it mentions here, actually, in verse 20, it mentions how they took these 12 stones out of the Jordan, they set them up. And it mentions here a little bit later on, actually the next verse, when your children, it's supposed to make a little altar-like thing, a memorial it's referred to. And it says, when your children ask them, "Why are these stones here?" In other words, when your kids say, "Hey, what's that heap of stones doing over there beside the water?" You just say, this is an opportunity for you to tell the story of what happened. This is a great example of you need to have things in your life that remind you of what God has done in your life in different times past. That's what Israel had built into them with this idea with the stones crossing. So this is and it's also different from the Red Sea crossing, because they didn't have the ark in the Red Sea. They were just fleeing Egypt, of course. You know how well that goes. But here it took a lot of faith to realize what God was doing, because the water didn't stop until the priest took the steps in there with the ark carrying them across the water. And it's the same way. They all have to get through. The ark is standing there waiting as the priests are holding it until they actually get it. Once their feet hit the dry land, then presto, all of a sudden the water comes back. Man, it's just a great story here of how God just revealing himself to these people in a very cool and unique way. And of course, then they set up that pillar. It's supposed to remind them of what God has done in their life. All right, Pastor Todd, what do you have there for us from Joshua chapter 4?
Well, it is. When you just stop and try to picture this in your mind, it is a phenomenal illustration. I mean, what a great story this is, because you can picture this mass of the Hebrews, this mass of humanity that have come all this way and endured so much. So many of them have perished, and the entire generation that left Egypt has died because they did not believe. And now you have that next generation. The only ones who are left from the first generation are Joshua and Caleb. They're the only ones that had faith. And now you have this next generation that is moving into the land that God had promised to them. And you get that beautiful picture of the power of God as the priests are faithful. And here's what we have to do. The priests had to put their feet in the water. Back in chapter 3, they had to put their feet in the water until the overflowing Jordan River stopped and heaped up in a pile upstream. And then they were able to touch the ground, and they were able to walk across the riverbed, and the people entered into that which had been promised to them. a generation earlier, and they began to then be able to possess the land. And so the people came across, as Jeff said, they built up, as God said, put this memorial to make sure that people remember. And then you see again, and this is important, so many times we only go part way. You got to go all the way. So many times the Lord tells us to do something, and we'll take the initial steps, and we'll go so far, and then we just kind of get lazy or sidetracked, and we don't finish. Well, those priests had to finish the work. Their feet had to touch dry ground on the other side. And when they did, then the river starts flowing again. And this is symbolizing you are now in the land that I have prepared for you and that I have promised for you. Now you can begin to possess it. And then we see the story of how they would then go through the land and possess the promised land that God gave them. But a key that Jeff had mentioned is the importance of those memorial stones. Because if you look at the very last verse of chapter 4, it says, they're to do this, that all of the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. They're to put these memorial stones up so that their next generations would ask the question, and they'd be able to say, here's what God did. He's awesome. He's faithful. He will do what he said he would do. But it's also so that the world sees how faithful and powerful God is. What are the memorial stones of your life? What are the things that you have done? We need to be looking at the things that we have done when we've been faithful and we walked in, we obeyed God, and God did something supernatural in your life. Remember those things, but don't just remember them. Memorialize them. Write them down. Tell the story. Tell others. Let other people know. It's going to be a remembrance to you when you go back and read it later, but also as you write it down, as you share it, as you tell others, others will know the power and the faithfulness of God. It is just a beautiful illustration. Jeff, why don't you wrap up verse number 54? And before I hand it back to you, I just want to say thank you, Donna. Thank you, Jeff. Hard to believe we've done 50 of these. Very exciting. Jeff, wrap up number 50 for us.
Well, again, I want to focus on something that's mentioned in verse 24 here, where that's something that you had read there, Todd, that all the peoples of the earth would know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. See, when God does something in your life, and you do have those memorial stones or those memorial things that you set up, this isn't just for your encouragement, as important as that is, but it really is something to be able to tell other people. I mean, think about it. It's actually, it's constant theme. It's part of the Great Commission, right? We're supposed to tell people. That's part of the whole idea of good news. We're supposed to tell people what the Lord's been doing in our life and what he's continuing to do and what he will do and what he will do in your life. So this was a very practical reminder for them set up that they would see this. What's God doing in your life? Are those memorials that you have set up? And are you telling other people just like this so that all the peoples may know how powerful God is? Thanks so much for watching One Verse. But we appreciate you spending some time with us. Hope to see you again next time right here on One Verse.